The candles I'd lit that morning were the same ones my mother gave me the day we moved into this house. Ivory tapers she'd bought in Savannah, wrapped in tissue paper and tucked inside a cedar box. She said, "Use them for something worth remembering." 25 years. I figured that qualified. I'd spent the better part of the afternoon in the kitchen, roasted chicken with high bees from the backyard garden. The garlic mashed potatoes my husband had requested every anniversary since our 3rd year together. A lemon tart chilling in the refrigerator. Our daughter had texted around 4 o'clock to say she was bringing wine. Our son called to confirm the time, 7 o'clock. Everyone at the table, the way it always was. I was adjusting the centerpiece when my phone buzzed. A message from my husband running a few minutes late. "Don't wait on me for drinks." I set the phone face down on the counter and went back to the flowers. I knew even then that something was coming. I'd known for 8 months. What I didn't know was that he'd chosen tonight to say it out loud. He walked through the door at 7:20 with his jacket over, his arm and a bottle of champagne I hadn't asked for. He kissed me on the cheek the way a man kisses a wall present peruncta, leaving nothing behind. Our daughter was already seated. Our son was pouring water. My husband set the champagne on the counter, looked around the room with an expression I can only describe as the face of a man who has already left, and said, "Before we eat, I need to say something." My daughter looked up from her phone. My son sat down the picture. I stood very still near the head of the table, my hands loose at my sides, and waited. "Think we all know things haven't been right for a while," my husband said. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the candles, at the tablecloths, at the centerpiece, everywhere except the person who'd spent the day making this room beautiful for him. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I want about the next chapter. And I think it's time I was honest with all of you." My son said, "Dad, I'm in love with someone else." He said it the way you'd announce a weather change. I have been for a while, and I think it's better for everyone if I stop pretending otherwise. The room went the particular kind of quiet that is texture. I could hear the candle flame moving. I could hear my daughter breathing. "Her name is irrelevant right now," he continued as if that were a kindness. "What matters is that I've already spoken to an attorney. I want a clean split. The house we'll have to figure out. My name is on the mortgage and I intend to be fair about it. But the reality is that maintaining this property on one income isn't realistic. So, it's our anniversary," my daughter said. "My husband paused today," she said, her voice completely level. "It's your 25th wedding anniversary, you know that, right?" He had the grace to look briefly uncomfortable. "I know the timing is what my son asked. I know it's not ideal. There are moments in a marriage, and I say this as someone who has now lived entirely through one, where you realize the person across from you has been a stranger for longer than you understood. Not a stranger in the dramatic sense. Not someone you never knew. A stranger in the quieter sense. Someone who has slowly, incrementally, stopped including you in their interior life. You notice it the way you notice the temperature dropping in a room. Not all at once, but eventually undeniably. I had noticed it in March of the previous year. A change in the angle of his phone screen when I walked by. A business trip to Atlanta that produced no receipts and no stories. A new gym bag that smelled faintly of a perfume that wasn't mine. I didn't confront him. I went to see an attorney instead. My attorney, a woman I'd been referred to by my college roommate, someone who had been through her own version of this, spent our first meeting asking me one question in about 15 different ways. What do you want the outcome to be? Not what do you want to happen to him? Not how do you want him to suffer? What outcome for your own life are you trying to protect? I thought about that question for 2 days, then I called her back and told her. She said, "Good, now let me tell you about the agreement you signed 25 years ago. I want to explain the prenuptial agreement because I think people assume those conversations are cold and transactional, that the couples who signed them have already factored in the failure of their marriage before it begins. But that wasn't true for us. My husband had come from a family with real estate holdings, a family business, assets that his parents wanted protected in the event of a worst-case scenario. I understood that. I wasn't insulted by it. I'd read the document, sat with an attorney of my own choosing, asked questions, and signed my name with a clear conscience because I intended to stay married. What I remembered, and what he had apparently forgotten, was the infidelity clause. It wasn't unusual language for that era. My attorney said she'd seen it many times in agreements drafted in the 90s, particularly in families with substantial holdings. In plain terms, if either party engaged in documented infidelity, The betrayed spouse retained primary claim to the marital home and a significantly larger portion of joint assets. The clause had an evidentiary requirement documentation, not accusation, which is exactly why I had spent the previous 8 months doing what I did. A private investigator, my attorney recommended a paper trail that was, by the time I sat at that anniversary dinner table, thick enough to rest a coffee mug on. I had not told my husband any of this. I stood at the head of the table while he explained in the measured tones of a man who had rehearsed this that he believed a clean break was healthiest for everyone, that he had no intention of being difficult about the finances, that he hoped we could approach the dissolution of our marriage as adults. My daughter had pushed her chair back slightly from the table as if she needed more air. My son was looking at me, not at his father, at me, watching my face the way he used to watch it when he was small and uncertain, checking for information about whether to be afraid. I reached down and picked up my handbag from where I'd hung it on the back of my chair. I set it on the table in front of me. I unclasped it and removed a manila folder, the kind with a metal clasp at the top, the kind that looks exactly like what it is, which is serious paperwork, and I set it on the table in front of my plate. My husband stopped talking. "I heard you," I said. My voice was steady. I want to be honest about that. I had practiced being steady. I had stood in front of the bathroom mirror and practiced it because I knew this conversation was coming. I just hadn't known which night he'd finally have it. "I want you to know I heard everything you said, and I appreciate that you decided honesty was the right approach. So, I'd like to offer you the same courtesy." I slid the folder across the table to him. He looked at it. "The way you look at something you don't yet understand is dangerous." "That's a copy," I said. "My attorney has the original. What you're looking at is the prenuptial agreement we signed on September 14th, 25 years ago. Specifically, I'd like you to turn to page 7, section 4, paragraph 2. Our daughter was watching him now. Our son hadn't moved." My husband opened the folder with the careful movements of someone who is trying to appear unhurried. I watched him find page 7. I watched him read. I know the exact moment he reached the infidelity clause because the rhythm of his reading changed slower, then stopping, then backtracking. "Behind the agreement," I said, "you'll find a series of dated documents, hotel receipts, phone records, and a 14-page report from a licensed investigator. That section is flagged with a yellow tab." He was not looking at me. "I've met with my attorney 4 times in the past 8 months," I said. "Everything in that folder has already been reviewed and verified. The short version is this. Per the agreement you asked me to sign before we got married, and per the documentation I've now provided, the marital home remains in my name, and the division of joint assets shifts substantially in my favor." I folded my hands on the table. "I've already spoken to the mortgage company, and I've already spoken to the bank." The silence in that room was different from the silence when he'd first made his announcement. That silence had been stunned and fragile. This silence was something else. This was the silence of a man watching a chessboard rearrange itself into a configuration he'd never considered. My daughter made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sob. Something caught between those two things, some combination of pain and recognition. My husband looked up from the folder. "When did you march?" I said. "When you came back from Atlanta." He set the folder down on the table very slowly. "You've been planning this." "I've been protecting myself," I said. "Which is what you should have expected me to do the moment you decided to stop protecting me yourself." He started to say something. My son stood up. "I don't think there's anything more to talk about tonight." My son said he wasn't angry, or rather, he was angry. But he decided calm was more useful than anger, which is something I'd always hoped he'd learn. Not here, not on their anniversary. He looked at his father with an expression I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Not hatred, something closer to grief. The face of someone releasing an expectation they'd held for a long time. "You should go, Dad." My husband looked at our daughter.